Hi, my name is Inga Olsen and I'm one of the co-creators of this amazing program together with Eleni. Today I want to share with you my own personal experience with unhealthy thought patterns, how they affected me, how they were expressed, but also most importantly, how I was able to overcome them and why I'd love to share this journey with you. From a very young age, I remember having power battles with my dad around the dinner table. So he was very strict, God bless him. He was very strict in his upbringing and he never really praised us. But one distinctive thing that I remember from my childhood was sitting by the dinner table, and he told us that we weren't allowed to leave the dinner table until we finished our plate of food. I remember seeing that as a challenge to see who could sit there the longest and who had the most patience and I guess, stubbornness to sit out and wait until, I basically waited until he gave up. And I was that gave up, it was more so the news were on TV, so he left the dinner table to go and watch the news. And then I asked my mum if it was okay for me to leave the table. So that meant that I didn't finish my dinner, and I remember waking up sometimes in the morning and I was so weak and my blood sugar was so low. I basically had to crawl down the stairs and I felt so sick, and I was lying on chairs by the kitchen table, and my mum, she had to prepare breakfast for me because I felt so weak and fatigued. So that was one of the things. Another thing throughout my childhood and early teens was that I was playing a lot of soccer, so I was participating in a lot of sport activities, and I guess it wasn't too much really, but in comparison to the amount of food that I was actually consuming, it was too much. So I actually did not grow weight-wise or height-wise for a bit of time, and I didn't get my period either, so I was a bit delayed in terms of my development in that regards. So it was brought up through the school nurses, and they were a bit concerned, so I was hospitalized for a day or two, and they tested my growth hormone levels and my other hormone levels because they were afraid that I didn't have enough growth hormone in order to grow. Those tests came back normal, so all my hormonal levels were perfectly fine. However, what they did not ask me at the time was how much I was eating and how much I was training, because it was like a imbalance in between my energy intake and my energy output, so it didn't allow me to grow and develop. Fast forward, in my early 20s and in my late teens, I had very low levels of self-worth, self-love, I guess, self-esteem, which transferred into binge drinking. So I drank a lot of alcohol. I also sought external validation from boys. So there was a bit of promiscuous behaviour, which is quite common when you seek external validation from other people. So binge drinking with alcohol, seeking external validation. There was also being quite picky, as I called it, with my food choices, and I also trained quite a lot back then as well. There were a few phases where I did not train, which was kind of unusual, but that was due to having boyfriends at the time and spending time with them instead. Anyways, and then in my early 20s, I also, that self-worth, a low self-esteem, no self-acceptance, made me quite depressed, and I was actually quite low. There were points in my early 20s where I was near suicidal. So I did reach out for help. So I did get some counselling through youth. It was like this help for youth. I'm not sure what the equivalent to it here in Australia would be, or the direct translation, because this was back in Sweden. But I reached out and I got some counselling for quite some time, which was helpful. So it made me, appreciate myself more. It made me love myself a bit more, etc. Then in my mid-20s, I moved to Stockholm to pursue nutritional studies. So I studied at Stockholm University and I've got a Bachelor in Nutrition. What that did was that I was surrounded with other students who did experience and express unhealthy thought patterns and behaviours. And that triggered my old behaviours again. So again, I became obsessed about eating clean foods, training. I compared myself a lot with others. So I was like, oh, if I want to be as skinny as she is, or if I want to look as good as she's doing, then I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to do what she's doing. She's training 2 hours a day. That means that I need to train 2 hours a day. She's vegetarian. That means that I need to be vegetarian. Like all thoughts like that was running through my head. Like I was comparing myself with others, and it all stemmed from my own thoughts about myself. And my thoughts about myself got expressed into actions like restricting food intake, training a lot, and then obviously like the binge drinking and seeking external validation and all of those type of things. So that continued for a few years, and then in my late 20s I moved to Australia. I was kind of like, I guess, known as the fussy eater. My partner that I'm still with, who I met in my late 20s, when we were going out for social events and things like that and going out to restaurants, he always asked me, you pick the restaurant because I don't know what you like and what you want to eat. So it was quite difficult to take me out on social events and on dates because we needed to go to a restaurant where I was allowed to eat the food. We couldn't go to any type of restaurant and I could not enjoy any type of meal. I remember as well going to social events like Australia Day, having tuna and broccoli in my handbag, and even like 1 or 2 years later, we ran into a few people that we met when I was in that phase of my life, and they're like, oh yeah, you're that chick with the broccoli and tuna in your handbag. And at the time I thought that was completely normal, but now when I'm reflecting back on my behaviours, I'm kind of like that, nah, that's not really healthy. So I got known to the broccoli and tuna girl at the local event space. And also remember throughout that phase that I kind of like felt superior going through the supermarket, and this is how I guess disordered my thought patterns were. I was walking through the supermarket like with my trolley, and I remember feeling better than anyone else in the supermarket because my shopping trolley only included chicken, tuna, egg whites and green vegetables. There was hardly any. If there was any carbs, it was brown rice or like sweet potato. So that was basically what I was eating, because when I moved to Australia, I got into bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, and I was doing the old school kind of like bro science way, where you are quite restricted in your food choices, because I thought that I needed to eat the way a bodybuilder do in order to look like a bodybuilder and compete as a bodybuilder, which is definitely not the case. You can still include any foods that you love and still see amazing results, and you don't need to exclude whole food groups or any foods. Moderation is obviously the key, but back then when I still had those disordered thought patterns, I thought that I needed to do that in order to compete as a bodybuilder. So that kind of like reinforced my thought patterns for quite a lot. I also started working for a company, like a wellness and weight loss company, and they also had like this really strict rules in regards to foods. So one of them had like a carb detox phase where you basically were eating protein and maybe small amounts of vegetables like celery and cucumber and stuff for a week. And then after that you were allowed to introduce vegetables, and then after that you were allowed to introduce fruit, and then last maintenance phase you were allowed to introduce like starchy vegetables, potato, rice, pasta and things like that, but in obviously smaller amounts. So again, that reinforced my unhealthy thought patterns. I educated myself in exercise and sports science. I did a Cert 3 and Cert 4 in personal training and fitness. So I've done all the education that you can get, not all, but like a lot. And depending on who I've been associating myself with and depending on who I've been hanging out with, it's either reinforced my unhealthy thought patterns or made me question those thought patterns and started thinking that, oh, maybe there's a better side, better thought patterns, better behaviours to engage in. And that happened when I started working in the supplement industry, and I met a dear friend of mine now, and he introduced me to macro counting. And although macro counting can have a negative side, like in the sense that you can become quite obsessed with counting your macros, it helped me overcome my unhealthy thoughts about food, and that you were only allowed to eat certain types of food in order to be a good person. So counting macros for me was the eye-opener, and talking to him on a daily basis as well was the one thing that made me challenge my unhealthy thought patterns about nutrition, but also about exercise. Like, I started to reverting back to what they actually taught me at uni, and what they talk to you about nutrition, about exercise, that you should include rest days, that you should have like active recovery and things like that. I used to train like 2 times a day, and I rarely allowed myself to have a rest day. If I go through my Facebook memories and stuff, it's like, oh, just been to the gym, can't wait to get back this evening. And I was training too much, eating too little, and most of all, like, it didn't make me happy. Changing my thought patterns, working on myself, working on my self-love, my self-esteem, accepting myself for who I am and flaws and all, working on that, challenging my beliefs about food and exercise have truly made a tremendous improvement of my life. I feel so much better. I'm happier. I am more content. I can enjoy social events without any anxiety or guilt. I don't need to compensate the next day by training for 2 hours or reducing my calories or anything like that. I'm actually truly enjoying life. And to me, it's really important because I got a young daughter, and for me to have challenged those unhealthy thought patterns and behaviors, and being able to bring my daughter up having a healthy relationship with food and exercise, praising her for all the good things she's doing, and making sure that she grows up with a healthy self-esteem, healthy self-love, and ensuring that she accepts herself for who she is, and being a positive role model to her. For me, that's the most important thing. I'm truly hoping that by sharing my experience with food, nutrition, exercise, and doing this program together with Eleni, and for you to go through this journey with us during these modules, I'm hoping that we will be able to challenge your thoughts, your behaviors, and that you will come out the other side being a happier, more content person, that's able to enjoy any food without any guilt, and that you are well aware of what's unhealthy thought patterns and behaviors and what's healthy. So thank you so much for listening to this, and I hope you truly enjoy this program.